Are you tired of fundraising stories that sound exactly like everyone else's? You know the kind. They use data and jargon, but fail to actually connect with the heart of your donors, leaving you stuck with plateauing revenue and a board that's not fully aligned. You're doing vital work, but your message is blending into the noise. In this episode, we're going to be shifting your perspective from just reporting your mission to building the stories that actually change it. We sit down with Andrew Jason, the leader who went from journalist to nonprofit ecosystem builder to unlock the power of starting small, moving fast, and inviting your community to genuinely opt in to your mission. You'll walk away with some actionable strategies for creating depth in your narrative, the kind of depth that transforms a curious supporter into a committed long-term donor. That's the power of strategic human-first storytelling. Let's dive in.
Breathe deep in warm chest.
Andrew Jason, welcome to Tellwell the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Max. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So, Andrew, we don't know each other super well. We've been in each other's orbits for a long time. Mm-hmm. We've been like one circle, maybe like removed, but we've been here in the Fargo ecosystem, loving on both the nonprofit community, but also the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And so, for the folks who don't know you, who's Andrew?
Well, let me tell you who I am. Yeah, so I'm with Emerging Prairie and Grand Farm. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit about the work that we do there, but a little bit about the history of who is Andrew Jason. I grew up in northern Minnesota, Black Duck, Minnesota, very small rural community, kind of northern Minnesota boy at heart. Came here for school at MSUM in Moorhead, go Dragons, and then kind of the traditional story was going to get out of Dodge, go to the big city, make a name for myself. And while I was in school, started falling in love with our community that we've built up here. And when I was in college, started interning with a little startup that was just getting off the ground called Spotlight Media. We have launched a number of different publications, from city and nightlife to business to agriculture, sports theme. So was really fortunate timing there. And so a big shout out to Mike Dragosevich, who was just getting this company started when I started was there for about 9 years, kind of helped grow the team.
That's a long time.
That is a very long time, yes.
Especially as millennials. That's a very long time to be at a job.
Yeah, I know. I talked to all my friends who have had a dozen jobs since graduation. I've had 2. So, but yeah, it was a great experience. Got to be in the heartbeat of kind of the art community, our ecosystem, and spent, like I said, 9 years there, was editorial director, so oversaw kind of all of our publishing arms of it. And then, fell in love with ecosystem building and some of the work that was happening at Emerging Prairie and Grand Farm, right where I was going. That's when I joined about 6 years ago, right in the beginning of 2020. Great time.
Great time to join any organization, especially an organization that focused a lot on events.
Yes, sir.
At that time.
Yep.
So, absolutely. So, Andrew, you really went from writing stories to, as a journalist, to really building stories as a nonprofit leader, because Emerging Prairie is a nonprofit.
Yes, sir.
Right? And can you tell us just a little bit of the backstory of Emerging Prairie and what are you doing today? What are you working on?
Yeah, well, I think, Max, you probably got to experience it firsthand, the Emerging Prairie story, but the story goes back to around 2011, 2012. There was a group of 4 kind of local entrepreneurs, Jake Jornstead, Andy Christensen, Greg Devine, and Miguel Danielson. And they said, hey, founders need kind of access to 4 things: access to capital, access to customers, access to talent, and access to other founders. And that's really the 4th one that kind of Emerging Prairie set out. So as a bunch of bold entrepreneurs do, they came out with a grand vision. They were going to kind of create a media site to tell the story about the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think they wrote 1 article, but what they started to do was hosting a lot of different events, programs, buying drinks, and the ecosystem. The founders started to come together. So we built out a co-working space that you know very well about.
Tellwell was born at the Prairie Den.
There you go. I got to see the OG Prairie Den desks upstairs. Very cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, we hosted a lot of different events like TEDx Fargo, 1 Million Cups, and kind of the ecosystem started to be built out.
Very cool. So you went from writing stories as a journalist to really building stories as a nonprofit leader. I'm curious, what did you learn in that shift, really about like the power of narrative to bring people together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think at the end of the day, people get so caught up in maybe like strategic goals, KPIs, SMART goals, yada, yada, yada. It's important. That's how the world functions. That's how you get things done. But at the end of the day, it's about creating a story and a narrative, and just kind of success begets success. So right before we were recording this, I was telling you, Grand Farm was born. We out at 40 acres just south of Fargo, that a local entrepreneur said, hey, why don't you start doing some stuff here? So we had 40 acres, a porta potty, a tent, and then we had the Senator Hovind called us and said, hey, we got Secretary Perdue coming through town. He's the USDA Secretary of Agriculture. You want to launch something? So we said, sure, why not? So we had nothing to start, but we were able to kind of build that story and, again, just get it going.
Wow. So tell us about that shift, though, because you really went from just reporting on the stories that were happening to creating the stories that were happening.
Yep.
What kind of shift did you need to make internally or externally to say, oh, now it's just not reporting on it. It's like, I'm in doing it, right? I'm the one who's actually like going out, making sure the tent is set up and like doing all those things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of an internal narrative shift that takes place, that you can be the star of your own reality, I guess, if you will. So much of journalism is built off of kind of elevating others, which is still extremely important in our work that we do as ecosystem builders. But I think, it start to recognize that, like, okay, the work I did as a journalist has real tangible benefits in the real world. And I think the other thing that is very beneficial was from going from the journalism world to kind of like the world I'm in now is from a deadline, a execution standpoint. These journalisms, whether you're at a daily newspaper, media, wherever, it is a tight turnaround. So you got to be executing and moving fast. And again, that goes into the narrative around, let's just start executing and build off of the success and just get some small wins that can start to capitalize on each other.
That is such a good little nugget right there. It's like, start with something and then ideate on it, build on it, evolve it, versus feeling like you have to have it perfect right out of the gate.
Yeah, 100%. So it's like the first year of Grand Farm we really got going was the summer of 2020, which obviously was the lousy summer, but we really were focused on experimentation and curiosity. I love that this is your year of curiosity that you guys are wrapping up here. But throughout that summer, in kind of a COVID environment outdoors, we hosted about 50 different COVID safe events. So we had some that were really successful, had several hundred people in kind of a 40-acre farm, and we had some events that nobody showed up to. And you know what was great is we stopped doing those. So we were able to just get these small iterative wins that we built on.
Yeah, that is so smart. And I think it's something that a lot of nonprofits could benefit from as well, is like, you don't need to go and do the biggest gala. Like, do small events that like you can create community, where you can create connection versus it being show.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So nonprofits often struggle to make people feel like they're a part of the story, unless they're like the big donors or the people that want to put their name on the event or put their name on the door or whatever that is. At Emerging Prairie, I'm curious, how have you guys approached really bringing the whole community in and feel like stakeholders in the EP story?
Sure. I will answer that as soon as I cough here. 1 second.
You're good.
So I think
also there's like no rush, because like we'll cut all this stuff out. So
right, well,
this is fully edited. So take your time.
What a professional establishment you have here, Max. Yeah. So I would say, I think a couple of things is, one, the fact that Emerging Prairie has a lot of different touch points with the community, whether that's at our weekly startup brew that we host every Wednesday, whether that's at our co-working space that we have in downtown Fargo, whether that's out at Grand Farm, our innovation campus that we have a lot of opportunities that you can kind of like, we can touch the community and get people involved and invite them to participate in light, meaningful ways versus, one gala a year where we elevate a couple of real impact stories, which are important, right? But, it's hard to see that day-to-day story and that progress that you're making. So I think having that kind of regular touch points is important with the community, and creating on-ramps for them to get involved. So like at Grand Farm, we do a lot of work with startups from around the world. So we always talk about what are these on-ramps that you can do. Kind of the light one is just come to an event, participate in the ecosystem. 2 would be, let's do some testing out at our farm, get you engaged, doing demos, whatever the case might be. And then, we can just do deeper and deeper levels of engagement with these startups to kind of help build them out. So
fascinating. And that's actually something I didn't know. I didn't realize that you guys were working with like other, egg startups from outside the region and inviting them here as well. So talk about that shift. Like how has that kind of shifted the whole EP story from just like being really focused on like this entrepreneurial ecosystem to kind of like inviting others in?
Yeah. Well, just to tell the kind of Grand Farm story real quickly here. So, like I mentioned, Emerging Prairie was really focused on this entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Fargo-Moorhead community that we're in here. And then at one of our events in 2017, a local entrepreneur by the name of Barry Batchelor challenged us to think about what's our region's major? What can we be the best in the world at? And he has a long-standing history of, starting companies that got acquired by Deere, AGCO, kind of one of those entrepreneurs. And that's when kind of a group of community leaders said, all right, it has to be agriculture technology. We have a legacy of that. We have a story, I guess you could say, going back to the late 1800s. The Bonanza farms were here. These were 18,000 acre farms in the late 1800s. Ed Melrose, just east here in Minnesota, was a turkey farmer in the 90s. He got tired of shoveling out his turkey manure in his barn, so he built the world's first skid steer. That became Bobcat. So there's this just long-standing innovation, his story of innovation that we have here. And that's kind of how we got Grand Farm started, was let's tell this story, pull in this technology, and put Fargo on the map on it. And as we've developed, that's still a big focus on it, but we've expanded kind of beyond that to focus on solving challenges in agriculture around the world. So the framework is pretty simple. Understand the region's challenge. So the challenges of a North Dakota farmer are going to be much different than a challenge of a Georgia farmer, for example. Understand this global innovation ecosystem. So what are the technologies that like a startup from Japan is working on that we can pull in? And then basically, how do you marry the tech with the challenge? And we do that through our events. We do that through our projects that we have out at our farm. So we have 2 locations. We got the one in Castleton, North Dakota, 600 acres. This year we had about 61 different organizations from around the country and world that have done test plots, demonstrations, kind of industry engagement. And then we also have a 250 acre farm in Georgia in partnership with the University of Georgia, Grand Farm, it's called.
Wow. I had no idea.
There you go.
So there's like this interesting through line that's happening where it's kind of around like, there's a little bit of urgency. There's a lot of community. And so I want to take us back a little bit. You were 21. You've talked about this before, but you had open heart surgery. I'm curious, how did that experience shift your perspective on urgency and on community and on the kind of work that you wanted to pour your life into?
Sure. Yeah, well, so, at a young age, 21, kind of having a near-death experience. I think I spent 23 days or something like that in the hospital because of different infections, surgery, yada, yada, yada. It really opens your eyes to, how fragile life is, kind of the importance of friends, community. I have vivid memories of kind of my college roommates come and visit me in the hospital, kind of all the community members that came around to that. So I think that really was a big eye opener for me and kind of how I live my life. I think the other thing that it realized was that, you got to execute, right? You got to move. So like I had my surgery in October, and then in May of that previous year, I ran my first marathon. So it was a pretty rapid, going from a marathon runner to a open heart surgery. But then I remember vividly in the hospital, I was like, I'm going to go back and run a marathon. So I signed up for the Chicago Marathon, which was about a year later. I signed it up in the hospital room, and I was like, all right, I got a goal now. right? It's kind of like you're doing a grand opening on Thursday. You need to get the tiles, you need to get the
Got to
bathroom
get the
done.
artwork up.
Yep, exactly. So it's good to have a deadline, I would say. So that was a forcing function. Got a year to train, kind of recover from open heart surgery, and that's what we did. We ran the Chicago Marathon after a year.
Okay, you make that sound very casual.
It was a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And like the work that you're doing in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, in the Grand Farm ecosystem is like, it's a lot of work. What did that 23 days in the hospital is a lot of time. What was it the type of thing where I'm having conversations and I'm like, when I get out of here, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to go and be a major contributor to a nonprofit in Fargo, North Dakota that helps farmers from around the world. That probably wasn't it.
That was not it.
But what was it? What were those stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think a couple of things. It was this was before streaming was a thing. So I remember checking out DVDs from the library at the hospital, which was not a very good DVD library. But so I had a lot of downtime just to write, and I was a journalism major in college at the time. And so spent a lot of time kind of just journaling, I guess you could say, thinking about kind of life in general. And, that's when it kind of came back to, all right, it's about the people. Earlier that year, I had studied abroad in England, got a really strong kind of a group of friends that are still some of my lifelong friends with. And, it just, everything that you do comes back to the people and the places. It's like, I always think about anytime you ask somebody, Max, what's your best meal that you've ever had in your life? At a restaurant. This is a question to you.
Oh, that's a real question? Okay. What is the best restaurant meal that I've ever had? Okay. There was I'm trying to think of where it was. I think it was in Chicago. It was this little French restaurant, and they had the absolute best. It was like a steak dish. So
there you go. So, usually when I ask that question, this example is kind of falling through, but usually there's three, it starts with where you're at and then who you're with. And then the food in the restaurant is kind of the tertiary. That doesn't matter. So it's if I think back to some of my favorite meals, it was being in Avalon, France with my group of friends, and I don't remember what we had, but it was in this castle. There was a bunch of wine, or being in New Orleans with my dad at this famous restaurant, and having some of these world great crab puffs. But it always starts with the location, the people, and then it's the food. And that's what I view. It's where are we at? It's a community. Who are we with? And then everything else kind of builds on that if you're in the right spot with the right people.
What's funny about that, and where that kind of hits home too, is every one of my favorite meals is with my best friends, right? And so it's not even I want to say it's almost taken for granted, right? Because it was, in this case, it was celebrating my friend's 40th birthday. Some friends got together who didn't normally hang out super regularly.
Sure.
And so it was a special little thing. But that's fascinating that okay, what do you take for granted a little bit? Because I was immediately going to what's my favorite food? And then what is it from there? So,
sure.
Fascinating. Okay. So so good. I was gonna say, if you need to cough,
there we go.
Feel free.
I'm good.
So as nonprofits are working to share their missions with folks and invite people in, as both a journalist and somebody who does this on a regular basis, what are a couple of hot tips that you'd have for folks trying to share their story more broadly?
Yeah, well, I think it's, being part of your own narrative, right? It's telling the story. I think a lot of people aren't very successful at that. It's also inviting people to opt in. I think one of the I remember in school, journalism professor kind of telling me that the audience will come as far along in the story as you take them. So if you do kind of just a high general overview of the story, great, they'll ride along with that. But if you can do a really in-depth, long form journalism article, people will follow that for the most part if it's well done. And I think that's kind of got legs in the nonprofit world. You need to invite people to come along. It's like I have a 1 and a 4-year-old, but we love dogs, so I can't wait till they're old enough that I can like start going to Homeward Animal Shelter and start volunteering with some of those, creating those opportunities. I just love that they have a great on-ramp to get these groups involved, and you know, they got a clear narrative that they're telling. And so I think one of the things that we've been the most successful at Grand Farm is just inviting people to come along. We've, over the last year at our innovation campus just west of Fargo, we've had over 5,000 people from 30 different countries that have come along, come and visited. And most of that was just say, hey, this is what we're doing. Want to come join and participate? And they said, yeah, sure.
That's incredible. And I love that idea of inviting people to opt in. I want to pull on that string of like the long form content, because I think in, you guys are helping people to figure out how technology works into things. Like we know AI is like the behemoth, it's an 800-pound gorilla in every room right now. But like with AI, a lot of those conversations are pretty shallow, right? Like if you say, this is my nonprofit, write a story for it, it's not going to come up with something deep. So what do you think creates that depth? What creates the umami flavor in that story?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think at the end of the day, it all comes back to what are the personal impacts that are coming from this. And so I think like a good example of a story that we've done is this was kind of during COVID, I think the summer of 2020, the North Dakota Department of Transportation was launching a autonomous lead follow truck for work zones. So the first truck is manned, the second truck is unmanned. And we got to see the technology. I was like, wow, this is a no-brainer for some of the workforce challenges in agriculture. So got connected, started talking with Maynard Factor. He's with Kratos Defense. They design military war weapons, and said, have you guys ever thought about agriculture? There's a lot of challenges that your technology would be relevant for. And so now they've deployed that technology into Mindak Farmers Cooperative down in Wahpeton. They've driven over 50,000 autonomous miles on North Dakota highways. It's making real impact for both a warfighting organization like Kratos Defense, now bringing some of this technology into agriculture. And then also some of like the drivers that are in this space, they now have the opportunity to still be a driver, but upskill, right? So imagine now you can be driving 2 trucks at once. And what would that mean for somebody that can now kind of level up, career opportunity, greater pay, things like that. So I think that's it's a great story of like, finding a challenge, finding technology, bringing it to solution. But then also, what are those personal impact stories? It's 50,000 miles on the road. It is the driver that can now, level up their skills.
Fascinating. Also, side note, like that was a great example, but also has me so intrigued as to all of the things.
Sure.
So as we're kind of coming up to the end of our time, this is a storytelling podcast, and we believe that stories shape who we are. And so I'm curious, what is one story from your life or work that still guides how you show up today?
That's a great question. I think if there is one, the open heart surgery is a big one, right? That kind of impacted everything. I think from a professional standpoint, so I knew Greg Teveen, who's one of the founders of Emerging Prairie. Ever since he was getting this started in 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. And, when this opportunity came about to kind of join the team here, I was looking back at my old emails and then my own personal email that I've had since like 2006, I realized the last time I emailed Greg from my personal email was saying, hey, I'm going to move out of Fargo. I'm going to move down to the Twin Cities, got any recommendation on folks I should connect with? And he gave me some suggestions. Sorry. So he gave me some suggestions, and then he, said, well, make sure you just kind of get involved in the community, show up for some of the things. And that's what I started doing. That's when the Prairie Den was first opening, the Founders Drinks was first opening. And that's what I saw kind of firsthand, the real world environment that this ecosystem, this network of welcomingness can create. And kind of the real world impact it can make for the stickiness factor, I guess.
What's one simple good thing that you want to leave people with? A piece of wisdom, a reminder that helps them lead with purpose?
Wow, you ask good questions, Max. I think with AI being the 800-pound gorilla or behemoth in the room, technology is impacting everything. But at the end of the day, it's the people that are adopting that technology and that it is making that real world impact on. So we need to put people before technology and not design technology for people.
Sage advice. Andrew, Jason, thanks so much for joining us on Tellwell the podcast. If people want to connect with you or Emerging Prairie or Grand Farm, where do they do that?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Every Wednesday from 8 to 9:30, we have Startup Brew downtown Fargo. So if you go to emergingprairie.com/startup brew, you'll find that there. Grandfarm.com is where you'll find all things at Grand Farm. And my email is andrewj@grandfarm.com.
Andrew, thanks for joining us on Tellwell the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Max.
Thanks for listening to Tellwell the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support the show is to share it with a friend or a colleague who is working to move the needle for their mission. At Tellwell, we believe that your story is your most powerful asset. Whether you're leading a nonprofit, a university foundation, or a community-driven brand, we're here to help you turn that story into action through strategic film, branding, and communications. For more tools to help you lead with clarity, head over to the resources section on our website. We have guides on donor engagement, brand strategy, and our Seasons of Story framework, all available for you to download at wetellwell.com/resources. If you're ready to stop begging for attention and start inviting people into your mission, let's explore what a partnership could look like. You can book a free planning session or a free planning call with our team at wetellwell.com/get started. Until next time, keep telling stories that matter.